Okay, great. We're live. Hello, everybody. Good evening. It's 𝗵𝗲𝗃 here from your Vitality Project with my dear friend and our guest tonight, 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗃. Welcome, Doug.
Thank you for having me.
Very happy for you to be here. Thank you. Thank you. Our topic in an ongoing conversation around recovery and healthful living, our topic tonight is how to risk vulnerability. And it's two guys talking about vulnerability. not always the easiest thing to come by in the male gender. I can't speak for the female, but for most, at least for me growing up, I was trained to be invulnerable, including to any kind of emotional vulnerability. And so I'm really glad to be meeting with you, A, because we're males, and B, because you model this so strongly in all of my years of knowing you, Doug. So I'm really honored to be with you in this conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a great topic for sure.
Yeah, thank you. I'd love to. I know I sent you a link to the post. The post is from some time ago, but it continues to be one that's on the front burner and matters to me. In fact, even since I wrote you this morning, I had a client session this afternoon with a man who's really working on opening his heart to his partner. And this topic was very, very much kind of on the front burner there. So I feel like it's very relevant, and I'm hoping that's of use to anybody that's listening or participating tonight. Doug, I want to invite you, just any comments to kind of start off, and we'll just see where the dialogue goes. Yeah.
It was an excellent video, an excellent topic. I watched it several times and reflecting on it all day since you told me what the topic was going to be. It is one of those things that can be so hard to even recognize the things that are going on beneath the surface in these difficult situations when we're not used to it. And I think an important first step of cultivating this vulnerability with people that we have heard and with ourselves is learning to...
Doug, let me interrupt you for just a second. We are having that echo right now. Can we go to plan B? I'm sorry, I apologize. It matters to me too much what you're saying to miss it. It's doing a slapback echo, and it might be distracting to people.
Let's see. All right, we'll try this one. Is that better?
It is better. It's a bit more reverby, and there's no echo, and I'm fine with it. I just really want to hear you, and I just don't want that distraction to throw anybody off track. Thank you.
Yeah, I was saying that I think a critical and very difficult first step of the process of ability is learning to recognize within ourselves what's really going on, deeper emotions that we're feeling there. Before we be vulnerable with others, we have to learn to acknowledge what's really going on for us, and that can be a scary thing to look at. That's a hard thing to do.
I was talking, as I shared with you earlier, talking with a client today, and we were talking about vulnerability and how it is that the root of vulnerability comes from the Latin word vulnus, and vulnus means wound in Latin. That's just their word for wound. And it really ties into your comment here, it seems like to me, is that, first of all, to be able to be vulnerable to you, I have to be conscious and in some kind of communication with my own woundedness. We have somebody who's listening and says they can't hear anything. I'm not sure what's going on tonight. Okay, hang in there, Spencer. We're going to figure this out. I'm trying to figure out what the heck.
Let's see. I hear you. Seems like you hear me.
I do hear you. Yeah. I don't see anything in the application part that would indicate that we're anything but online. I do a test, and it seems to be working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm showing green here on my microphone.
Yeah. Spencer says, is the mute button on for you guys? Put it on and unmute it. It's not. I'm just going to go ahead and let me just write him real quickly. 𝗷𝗄𝗃 on this end. I'm going to assume it may be on some interaction between your end, Spencer, and our end. He's saying it might be on his end.
Okay.
Well, here we are modeling vulnerability.
Yeah.
In fact, I have to tell you, Spencer said, he said, way to make them feel vulnerable. I think he was chiming in with the fact that we're starting off with some serious boldness here. I'm sorry, Douglas. I really care about this topic. I care about your comments on it. Can we just try to pick up? So we're talking about wounds and being conscious of one's wounds prior to being able to communicate. Those requires being aware of them ourselves, right? Yeah.
Right. And of course, too, with our wounds, the more clear communication matters, more difficult it is, right? The more those wounds really come to the fore and become the focus of holding us back, or what potentially can hold us back. Stakes are raised in that way. It becomes even more difficult, more important, and so really, it takes a lot of courage. It's one of my favorites too. Courage comes from the Latin for heart, right? A lot needs to be into it. A big heart developed these interactions with ourselves and the people we care about, and developing that. It's a must in recovery and in life, living the life we want to live.
Yeah. I'm going to write her name in here just because she's so significant. I know that she's implicit in our presentation. Brene Brown on vulnerability would be a real resource, and your reference to courage, the way that you speak of it, is so reminiscent of what Brene Brown says about it. I was thinking as I was listening to you too, is that if I want closeness with you, or if we want closeness with a family member or a partner, it requires going through the valley of the shadow of death, which makes intimacy really challenging. If we really want authentic intimacy, heartful intimacy, it requires our being vulnerable. It requires safety to risk that to begin with. But then given safety, it requires a tremendous amount of what you just said rightly is courage, a deep courage to jump off into the abyss.
And for me, at least, the early stage of my addiction were characterized by using drugs and alcohol as a means to bypass that courage. I spent a lot of time growing up not feeling like I belonged, not feeling like I fit in, not feeling like I really connected with anyone. And the more I was rejected, the more difficult it became to continue to share. And so I turned to substances as a way to help me bypass that and move through it. Learning how to tap into that courage part of myself and move forward with vulnerability, facing that fear of rejection anyway, was one of the most critical things I did in recovery.
Thank you. Yeah, it's no accident that they sometimes refer to alcohol as liquid courage. Carl Jung made the distinction between, he didn't use these terms, but we can use them, the distinction between liquid courage on the one hand, which is a facsimile of authentic courage, and then the real thing. In fact, if we're talking about liquid, he talks about addiction, he calls it a thirst for wholeness.
Right.
And the wholeness that we want is authentic connection with ourselves and with others. And its facsimile might be had through liquid courage, and it won't slake that thirst ever in a long-term way. Yeah,
that's right. Because we don't get connection and the intimacy that we're looking for unless we're willing to share vulnerable parts of ourselves.
One of the things that's implied in this conversation is how we can forgive ourselves for our wounds, for our limitations, and for the way that those have manifested in relationships. And it reminds me, I know I kind of prepaid this with you, it reminds me of work that you and I have done together on this topic of forgiveness. And I wonder if you might comment on that in terms of facing my own wounds directly with courage, as well as bringing those before, let's say, an intimate partner, and the courage that requires, and how forgiveness might intersect with this whole thing of my being vulnerable with another.
Yeah, for me at least, those those beliefs and fear of rejection happen through interactions with other people. The wounds happen in relationship and in dialogue, and it takes a lot to understand that it was only other person's defense mechanisms, their own trauma, their own wounds that caused them to behave in a particular way. And that deserves compassion, and it deserves tenderness and my forgiveness. Learning how to forgive is just cool too, and myself as well. I know that I had acted in ways through addiction and other things that occurred around that I guess would be best described as unskillful. Learning to forgive myself as one artist, and so Bob got me a practice, a meditation. You and I actually built a program together to guide us through the process of forgiveness, and it has become so important, so critical to me. I keep coming back and working with it deeper. I get into this program, this guided meditation that you and I did, the freedom of forgiveness. It's called. The more I get out of it.
Yeah, thank you. I just cited it here as a resource for anybody who wants to check it out. You can enter that URL into your search engine and check it out and find out more about what Doug's talking about, what it is he and I worked on. I was so struck as you were talking a minute ago, Doug, about how our wounds so oftentimes occur interpersonally, both us as the sender and the recipient, and that how do we forgive ourselves? How do we forgive others? And this whole issue of vulnerability, which requires safety, is going to require some ability. And I like your use of the term skillful. Some skillful means for being able to drop into a place where I can acknowledge the limitations of myself and of my partner, of my whoever it is, my loved one, let's say. And I feel like that you and I have provided a guide that can serve as inspiration for people doing that. And we've talked about this, I practice it every day, and it's literally exactly that format that we developed. It's not veered much in about 8 years now. I guess it's going on 9 years of practice of this on almost a daily basis. And as you and I have talked before, Doug, it's really been transformative. And that includes our collaboration, your contribution. It's interesting because it started off as a contribution musically, and we have years of friendship now that it's all interwoven for me. So it's way beyond music, and it's way beyond words. The words are fairly simple. I think you can summarize the words. I think they are summarized in a little booklet in just a few sentences, a few stanzas. But the practice can go on for a lifetime, it seems like to me.
Yeah, that's because there's always another layer to peel back to. That's one of the things that I've been able to explore. I worked with it. There's always another level. There's always a way to go deeper. With intention, cleaning up of the things that happen on a daily basis, and I still make mistakes, and need to ask for forgiveness, to offer it to myself, and to offer it to others all the time. And it's a very powerful means of doing.
Yeah. I've been studying this summer into the fall the book-length poem by T.S. Eliot, The Four Quartets. My dear friend Jim Finley has been working with my wife Colleen and me. We meet a couple times a week and just gradually moving through this incredibly powerful poem. And he finishes it. I'm not going to be able to remember right now because my brain is too tired at the end of the day. Let me just spend a second with it, because he finishes it with something that reminds me so much of what you just said. We shall not cease from exploring, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time.
Yeah.
This idea that you just keep starting and ending, but that you keep working the material, it keeps spiraling. I actually thought of something a minute ago, and I say this totally tongue in cheek, and I can say it with you as my friend and with Spencer, I think, listening to us tonight. Earlier in that same poem, he has this point where he says, something like this. He says, do you think I'm repeating myself? I shall repeat myself. And he goes and repeats the same thing again. It makes me think we've got this kind of doubling echo tonight. It's the first time it's ever happened for us. And I was thinking maybe it requires hearing it twice, what we're talking about. I say that tongue in cheek, but yeah, kind of looking at it as, okay, we've got a doubling echo tonight. That's an interesting phenomenon.
Well, in terms of forgiveness, what benefits is that once I've done that forgiveness, I can look at people in a new way again, in a different way. Returning home for the first, like seeing for the first time. Without getting off some big metaphysical tangent, reincarnation to me is this idea of every past moment, with every breath we take, every thought we think we're just a little bit changed. And when we see a person with fresh eyes, as they in this moment, which we can only do after we've forgiven them and let go of whatever we were holding, whatever resentment we were holding, whatever was in the past. Only then can we really be with someone, connecting right now, born and seen again for the first time in this moment, as we are right now.
Yeah, that's beautiful, Douglas. That's beautiful. Well, if that's being metaphysical, then please rave on. I like very much what you're saying. The biblical image of St. Paul comes to mind, where he says, we see through a glass darkly, with the eye sense that there'll come a day where we see more clearly, where the veil will be lifted and we can actually see things as they are. It's an amazing grace, isn't it, Doug, over the course of our lifetimes, with the kind of practices that we're talking about, where we can actually become vulnerable to ourselves and see our vulnerabilities in a radically new light. I think it's a lifetime of transformation, at least for me. But as I've shared before, and I've shared it with you, Doug, is that when I first got into recovery, nearly 10 years ago right now, I was in the state of mind that I think I had been in probably most of my life, but unaware of it. And I sometimes will just summarize it. I think I've spent about 90% of the time feeling some level of shame. And that's arbitrary. It could have been more, could have been less, but just, I think that's close to how comprehensive it was for me. It was so comprehensive I wasn't aware of it. It was the water I swam in. I literally, the water I swam in. It might be more accurate to say 100%, honestly. But I realized that just over a course of a little bit less than a decade, which is an extraordinarily short period of time to look at the transformation I've experienced, I think I about 10% of the time ashamed now. And the way I'll talk about that is that shame can get evoked for me. If somebody really wants to humiliate me, I've got hooks for that. I can be vulnerable. So I'm not invulnerable. Speaking of vulnerable, I'm not invulnerable to shame, but I am the buffer, the healing, whatever. I don't even know what to call it. It's like the transformation that's occurred is that those hooks have shrunk. They're it's really extraordinary. I know I've shared this with you, and I'm right on the edge of tears sharing it with you. Shared it with you and our friend John Dupuis before. This is the central gift to me of recovery, has been able to become vulnerable to myself, really for the first time, which means that I can now risk, on a good day, being vulnerable to you. And I have many more good days than bad days this deep into recovery. And it's a central gratitude has completely changed the complexion of the world to me.
And there's a lot there. Learning to forgive yourself in recognizing you still have those hooks. Anyone else we're dealing with too, who may still have those hooks into shame, we can for them and interact in a different way. We can evoke shame in people if we choose, or we can forgive them, move on, and allow others the opportunity to feel vulnerable and grow and move forward, so that we can all come to that better place.
Yeah. It's that second strand in the meditation that you and I co-created that works on forgiving others. It starts off by asking for forgiveness. That's the first strand. The second strand is to offer forgiveness to others. And the third strand is to offer forgiveness to ourselves. And I think each one of those is hugely significant. That second strand is such a vital one. Just what you just said is that we can transform relationships by seeing through the eyes of compassion. And I really think compassion is at the root of it. If I know why you've said or done something that was harmful to me, if I can understand that, while it doesn't excuse it, provides a basis for me for forgiving you, for relinquishing resentment, which is how I understand forgiveness. And without that compassion, I don't see how anybody can do that. I do see people will talk about forgive and forget. I think you can make a decision to do that, but I think it's cognitive forgiveness. I don't think it's emotional forgiveness. I think this deeper level forgiveness requires having some kind of skillful scalpel, I should say. And I think the scalpel is the scalpel of love and compassion and understanding and empathy. And I think with that, it's quite extraordinary what we can do in terms of healing. I always want to add a proviso here, is that some people will say to me, and we've talked about this before, they'll say, well, I can't forgive this person, oftentimes a significant other, and they're like, I can't forgive them for what they did. And I'm not counseling that. I don't think that it's for anybody to set a tempo or an agenda at all around this. But if you feel inclined towards transforming a relationship that's been knotted up or blocked because of resentment, the material that link that we put, I mean, Doug, we just do a deep dive into different methods for getting out that. And I think it's really useful. But I don't want to ever be misunderstood as saying, well, you should do this, or how dare you not? I honestly, and I've shared with you before, I've had clients share with me things that have happened to them in intimate relationships that I've said to them, and I utterly mean it. I don't think it can be forgiven.
Yes.
And I think at kind of a relative level, I think maybe there are things that can't be forgiven at kind of a relative human level. And I think it's almost disrespectful to say that you should do that. And I'll leave absolute level to the metaphysicians.
Yeah, I agree with that too, because well, forgiveness, doesn't mean condoning what happened or putting yourself in a position where you are set up to be hurt again, and that key concept beyond there as well.
Yeah. We've been talking about vulnerability, and it's one of the reasons I don't recommend people getting into couples counseling in active addiction. My wife, Colleen, who's a full-time marriage and family therapist, fully endorses this as well, is that you need safety to be vulnerable to do effective couples work. And active addiction leaves at least one person really encumbered brain-wise in terms of being a reliable holder of affect, not the least of which is aggression. And so if I don't have any way to contain my aggression as a function of active addiction, how the Sam Hill am I going to be safe to get vulnerable with in couples therapy? And so the initial goal, it seems like to me, that with initial priority across the board is sobriety, is to get literally sober. And then let's do the emotional and relational healing that can follow, but it requires sobriety. I don't have a lot of confidence in the midbrain as the locus of compassionate, caring, insightful interaction. It requires complete frontal cortex. And so don't try this stuff at home.
Yeah. But it is amazing how many different issues addiction is the primary big problem for. It has to be dealt with for first two cases. It's amazing how many things just seem to magically clear out on their own once one out of the way.
Yeah.
I mean,
I spent the whole
relations especially will still require a lot of work, but
yes, yeah. I was just going to say, I've spent the entire day today meeting with one individual after another, with a couple of groups in the day, and what you just said has been a real through line across my entire day, is that one person after another, including in groups, are talking about how it is such a radical game changer to begin to have your life, your spirituality, your creativity, your sensitivity, your potential to have that back, or to have hope of that, and to be getting a taste of that, just like one session after another. It's really quite remarkable. If somebody could just be a bug, or or a little bird on my shoulder and hear this, if you have ambivalence, if you're in active addiction and ambivalent about whether to move forward or backwards or whatever like that, I wish you could just be on my shoulder today. It's like people regaining their birthright. I feel like the luckiest person alive for the work I do, because I get to see people coming back to themselves again. It's just like literally one session after another after another. It's really extraordinary.
Talk about reason to keep moving forward, to a calling, a reason to.
Yeah,
that's got to be so inspiring to hear.
Yeah. It encourages me, Doug. I don't necessarily share this in my sessions. I would, but I'm inspired by every single client I talk to that's really embracing their recovery sincerely, because that's my only wish as well. And so I want to be. Jung talked about that the psychotherapist must. He used the metaphor of a surgeon, and that the surgeon must have a clean scalpel and clean hands. And so my work encourages me to keep my scalpel and my hands clean, because I see the benefits in front of me one session after another. And so it's really this kind of mutually reinforcing thing. I really do mean that. I would highly recommend for anybody that wants to be in recovery to do the work I do. So much positive incentive all day long. It's really extraordinary. Doug, we should probably wind down in a minute, but I'd like to give you the final word. Any final thoughts that you have around this topic of vulnerability or otherwise? Yeah.
Well, I want to say thank you for bringing me here to have this conversation, to have all these conversations, and giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts with you and with anyone else who's listening, to express myself in that way, and have this to be vulnerable, healing and transformative to me. I'm grateful for it.
It's absolutely mutual, my friend. All right. Well, I wish you a good evening. Thank you, Doug, so much for joining again. We'll be back together in 2 weeks. Thank you so much for tonight. Blessings to you, my friend. Okay. Take care. Good night. And good night to everybody who is watching us tonight. Wish you all well. Have a good evening.